Hey guys, tonight we drift into a city where the air tastes faintly of kerosene, where shadows flicker red and gold against the walls, and where the night hums with the low growl of an engine that carries both authority and destruction. In this place, fire is not for warmth or for gathering. It is a weapon, an eraser of memory, a ritual designed to keep mind silent. You probably won't survive this world with your curiosity intact. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're settling in, tell me, where are you right now, and what time is it in your corner of the world? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Montag walks the streets as if the night belongs to him. His black uniform glints in the orange glow, and the brass nozzle of his flamethrower feels like an extension of his arm. There's a satisfaction in his work, or so he's told himself for years. When the alarm sounds, the truck roars through sleeping neighborhoods, and the ritual begins. Kerosene sprayed in wide arcs, the hungry crackle of flames, the curling of paper into black confetti. It is a ceremony that ends with silence. No argument, no questioning, just the clean emptiness of absence. But one evening, the rhythm shifts. Walking home from work, Montag meets Clarice McClellan, a young woman with eyes so alive they seem to carry their own light. She doesn't rush past him like everyone else. Instead, she asks questions, small, disarming things like, "Are you happy?" The words linger, sliding past his armor in ways no warning from his captain ever could. She notices details he's long ignored. The dew on grass in the morning, the taste of rain, the quiet beauty in moments that pass without notice. Their conversations are brief but unsettling. Clarice speaks of a time before screens and speed, before fire was used to erase history. She tells him that people once sat together and talked, that books once mattered, that life could be about more than the mechanical grind of work and distraction. Montag's home feels different after meeting her. The cold walls of his bedroom, the low hum of his wife Mildred's parlor walls blaring endless chatter. It all feels louder, harsher. Mildred's world is made of flat, flickering faces on giant screens, characters she calls family, but who never truly see her. When she overdoses on sleeping pills one night, the mechanical snake sent to pump her stomach works with clinical indifference, and the operators leave without a trace of concern. Montag realizes that in this city, even life-saving feels automated, emptied of meaning. At work, Captain Beatty recites the official creed. Books are dangerous, filled with conflicting ideas, breeding unhappiness and discontent. Fire cleanses, removes temptation. And Montag, who has always nodded along, finds himself staring into the embers longer than he should. The first spark of disquiet is small, barely a whisper in his mind. But as days pass, Clarice's voice returns to him in fragments. Questions that seem innocent yet unanswerable in the rigid order of his world. And though he doesn't yet know it, the smallest question can be more dangerous than a roaring flame. The night air feels heavier now, the orange glow of burning houses less certain, the smoke curling upward like unanswered prayers. Montag walks on, but with each step, something within him is beginning to stir. Montag's restlessness grows like an ember refusing to die, flickering in the quiet hours when the city's roar has softened. Clarice's absence hits him harder than he expects. One day, she is simply gone. Her house remains dark, her laughter absent from the street. Mildred mentions offhandedly that she was killed in an accident, her family having moved away, but the words are delivered with such casual detachment that Montag feels a hollow ache. The world around him swallows people whole, and no one even pauses to mourn. At the firehouse, things move as they always have. The cards are dealt, the laughter rough and empty, the alarms ready to summon them toward destruction. Yet Montag's hands feel heavier when holding the nozzle, as if the brass resists him. The sight of burning pages once felt like accomplishment. Now it gnaws at him. The words, snippets caught in mid-burn, seem alive in their final moments, twisting and curling into the air as if pleading for rescue. The turning point comes in the form of an old woman. Her house is stacked floor to ceiling with books, the air thick with the scent of paper and dust. The firemen storm in, dousing everything in kerosene, their boots leaving prints on the carpet of her life. But she refuses to leave. She stands still, a stubborn flame of her own, and chooses to burn alongside her books. Montag watches in stunned disbelief as she strikes the match herself, her silhouette dissolving in the orange blaze. On the ride back, the laughter in the fire truck feels obscene. Montag hides something under his coat, a single book snatched without thinking in the chaos. It is warm against his chest, almost alive. He tells himself it means nothing, but deep inside, he knows he has crossed an invisible line. That night, he lies awake beside Mildred, who chatters about her television, family, and the new script that will let her play a part. Her words are a constant stream of noise, but Montag barely hears her. He feels the weight of the stolen book under his pillow, the weight of a choice that cannot be undone. Captain Beatty visits the next day. His tone is casual, even friendly, but there's an undercurrent Montag can't ignore. Beatty speaks at length about the history of their world, how books became dangerous not through government decree, but through the gradual preference of people for speed, entertainment, and simplicity. Complexity, contradiction, and thought became burdensome, so society cast them aside. The fireman's role is simply the final safeguard against the return of that discomfort. Montag listens, but his mind is elsewhere, on the old woman's final defiance, on Clarice's vanished smile, on the alien texture of printed paper in his hands. He realizes that Beatty knows more than he lets on, and perhaps even expects Montag to break the rules. When Beatty leaves, Montag opens the hidden book. The words stare back at him, unblinking, steady. They do not shout or demand, but they carry a weight heavier than fire could ever erase. He pulls more books from the vent in the ceiling, treasures he has stolen in moments of weakness. There are more than he remembers taking. As Mildred protests, frightened of what the books might bring, Montag feels something shift fully inside him. The kerosene-soaked life he has lived suddenly smells acrid and false. He does not yet know the road ahead, but he knows one thing with absolute certainty. He can never go back to burning without question. Outside, the night hums as it always does, but for Montag, the silence between those sounds is now deafening. The flames in his world no longer warm him. They threaten to consume something far more precious than paper. Montag wakes to a suffocating sense of weight pressing against his ribs. Not the heaviness of sleep, but the awareness of what now lies hidden in his home. The books rest in their secret places, each one a silent accusation. He feels as though their presence sends out invisible signals, pulsing against the thin walls of the apartment. Mildred moves through the morning in her usual trance, her face lit by the wall-sized television, sipping coffee without tasting it. She does not notice the tension in him, or perhaps she notices and chooses not to see. Driven by an unshakable need, Montag reaches for the phone and calls Faber, the old man he once met in the park, a retired English professor, his face marked by years of quiet withdrawal. That meeting had been brief, just enough for Montag to see the flash of intellect and fear in his eyes. Now, as the line rings, Montag wonders whether Faber even remembers him. The voice on the other end is cautious, almost brittle, but Montag pushes past the hesitation. He speaks of the woman who burned with her books, of the ache in his chest, of a nagging suspicion that there is something vital in those pages worth more than the false comfort of his profession. Faber listens, and when he finally speaks, his words are heavy. It's not the books you're looking for, Montag. It's the meaning they carry. Without that, books are just paper and ink. Montag visits him. Faber's small apartment smells of dust and old air. Stacks of books sit in careful disarray, as if arranged for both quick access and quick destruction should the alarm come. Faber explains the depth of their problem, how the loss of books was not a sudden act of tyranny, but a slow surrender by the people themselves. They chose ease over thought, comfort over truth, until censorship became almost unnecessary. We are not at war with the authorities, he says softly. We are at war with our own laziness. Montag's pulse quickens. The truth feels sharper than any blade he has known. He wants to act, to resist, to do something reckless and decisive. Faber, however, urges patience. Resistance must be strategic, not impulsive. He proposes a dangerous plan. Plant books in the homes of firemen, undermine the trust in their work, turn the machinery of censorship inward on itself. Montag agrees, his mind alight with the possibility. Before he leaves, Faber hands him a small green earpiece, a communication device that will allow them to speak secretly. With it, Faber's voice can guide Montag in moments of danger, an invisible presence in his ear. It feels like a lifeline. The world outside seems sharper now. Montag returns to the firehouse. The books at home still hidden. Faber's voice now an unseen companion. The other firemen seem oblivious, their laughter crude, their movements routine. Captain Beatty, however, watches him with eyes that feel like they have already read his thoughts. Beatty begins to speak again, weaving a tapestry of contradictory literary quotes, each one chosen to confuse, to unsettle, to remind Montag of the futility of rebellion. As Beatty's monologue winds on, the alarm sounds. The crew rushes out, the fire truck's siren cutting through the streets. The address flashes in Montag's mind, and his stomach tightens. He knows it. The truck stops in front of his own house. The others begin unloading equipment, their faces unreadable. Beatty steps forward, holding the warrant. "Fireman," he says with a thin smile, "your duty is calling." The kerosene can is pressed into Montag's hands. The air is too still, the silence too loud. In his ear, Faber whispers urgently, but Montag's heart is pounding so hard he can barely hear. His life, every safe and false thing in it, has brought him to this exact moment where the flames are no longer just a tool, but a test. The scent of kerosene fills Montag's nose, sharp and invasive, settling into the back of his throat like a bitter taste he can't swallow away. His own home looms before him, not as a shelter, but as a target, an object about to be erased. Mildred stands off to the side, her suitcase already packed, eyes avoiding his, her lips a thin, trembling line. She walks past him without a word, slipping into a waiting car. It is only then that Montag realizes she has called them, traded his trust for the illusion of safety the system promises. Captain Beatty stands close enough for Montag to feel the faint warmth of his breath. His voice is low, almost intimate. "We all have to clean house sometimes," he says, and though the words could be about any fire they've ever set, Montag hears the venom beneath them. Beatty wants not just the destruction of the books, but the destruction of the rebellion taking root inside Montag's mind. The other firemen stand ready, their faces impassive. They are cogs in the same machine Montag once oiled and fed without question. Now, standing here, he sees them differently, not as comrades, but as instruments of an ideology so deeply embedded that it runs almost without oversight. This, Montag thinks, is the real danger. A system that polices itself through willing participants, through those who never question its purpose. Faber's voice crackles in Montag's ear, urging restraint, urging him to think beyond this one moment. But the rage is too sharp, the betrayal too fresh. Montag feels as though the house, every wall, every corner, contains the echo of his private awakening, the fragile beginnings of a life outside ignorance. He cannot burn it under Beatty's command without also killing that spark. Beatty, sensing his hesitation, begins to taunt him with deliberate cruelty. He speaks of Clarice, of her odd questions and vanished presence, suggesting that her kind always end up disappearing. He mocks the woman who burned herself, reducing her sacrifice to a meaningless spectacle. Then he turns his words toward Faber, his voice curling with suspicion, hinting that he knows Montag has help. Something inside Montag snaps. The weight of the flamethrower in his hands shifts from reluctant burden to chosen weapon. In one sudden, irreversible act, Montag turns the fire on Beatty. The captain is engulfed, the roar of flame blotting out his shouts, reducing him to a writhing silhouette. The other firemen freeze, shocked into stillness, and Montag knows there is no turning back. The moment the fire dies, the world rushes in, sirens in the distance, the hum of the mechanical hound already drawing near. Montag knocks the remaining men aside, seizes the few books that survived, and runs. Faber's voice is urgent now, a lifeline threading through the chaos, guiding him toward escape. The streets blur under the pounding of his feet, each step pulling him further from the life he has destroyed and closer to one he cannot yet imagine. The hound's metal claws strike the pavement behind him, its sensors locked onto his heat, his scent, his guilt. Montag runs faster, cutting through alleyways, ducking into shadows, every muscle screaming for rest. He knows the city's eyes are on him now, its cameras, its informants, its hound. He is no longer a fireman. He is the fire itself, untethered and dangerous in the eyes of the state. When he reaches the riverbank, the city lights burn behind him like a false sunrise. Faber's voice tells him to move quickly, to use the water to erase his scent. Montag steps into the cold current, the water enveloping him, carrying him away from the chase, away from the burning streets. The mechanical hound remains behind, prowling the shore, its sensors confused by the sudden absence of a trail. Floating downstream, the sounds of the city fade. The stars open above him, vast and unblinking. And for the first time in years, Montag feels the possibility of a different life. Though whether it will be long or short, he does not know. The river carries him into the unknown, and as his mind drifts, the voices of the past, Clarice's laughter, Faber's cautions, even Beatty's taunts, blend into the soft rush of water, becoming part of the current that now claims him. The river delivers Montag into a world he scarcely recognizes, not because it is unfamiliar in geography, but because it is untouched by the fevered pulse of the city. Here, the air feels heavier with the scent of soil and leaf, the quiet pierced only by the rustle of small creatures and the distant call of an owl. He steps onto the bank, dripping and cold, but strangely calm, as though the water has rinsed away not only his scent, but also the frantic weight of the chase. For the first time in days, perhaps weeks, there is no immediate threat. The absence of sirens or mechanical hums sharpens his senses to other details. The texture of the earth beneath his palms, the way the moonlight slides along the contours of the trees, the faint rhythm of his own breathing. It feels like stepping into an older, slower reality, a space where time itself has loosened its grip. As he moves deeper into the woods, his mind begins to turn over what has happened. The city, with its noise and neon, seems less like a home and more like a vast, controlled organism, a body that rejects any cell threatening to act independently. Montag realizes now that Beatty was never just a man, but a voice for the city's immune system, tasked with neutralizing ideas before they could spread. In killing him, Montag severed his last tie to the role he once played in keeping that system alive. His path brings him to the flicker of a small campfire ahead. The figures seated around it are not startled when he approaches. One of them, a tall, weathered man with eyes that seem to see more than they reveal, greets him simply, "You're welcome here." The man introduces himself as Granger and explains that they are a group of people living outside the city's control, each having memorized entire books to preserve them for a future in which they might be needed. Montag listens astonished. These people have no printed libraries, no shelves weighed down with bindings, yet within their minds they carry the words of countless authors, an invisible archive resistant to fire. One man speaks of the book he holds in memory, his voice measured, as if reciting a prayer. Another woman recalls passages of poetry, her tone soft but steady. Montag begins to understand. Here, books are not objects but living things, carried forward in the only place the fireman cannot reach. They speak to him not as a fugitive, but as someone who has passed through a necessary threshold. In their view, the destruction of the city's illusions often requires loss, sometimes catastrophic loss. Granger, sensing Montag's quiet grief, tells him that every phoenix must burn before it can rise again, and that human beings, too, have a tendency to destroy themselves before seeking renewal. That night, they sleep under a sky free from the city's glare. The fire burns low, its embers pulsing in a rhythm that matches the quiet breathing of the group. Montag lies awake, feeling the unfamiliar texture of hope, fragile but real. The air here holds no scent of kerosene, no ash drifting like slow snow. Instead, there is the damp smell of the riverbank, the warmth of earth beneath him, and the knowledge that he is no longer alone. In the morning, the news comes in the form of a distant flash, bright enough to turn night into day for a heartbeat. A low rumble follows, rolling across the landscape like an echo from the end of the world. The city has been bombed. From their vantage point, they see the faint mushroom of dust rising on the horizon, the outline of their former home collapsing into nothingness. The group does not weep. Instead, there is a silence heavy with recognition, as though they had been expecting this end all along. Montag feels a pang. Mildred's face flashes in his mind, pale and turned away. But it is tempered by the awareness that she, like so many others, had long surrendered her life to the city's emptiness. Granger turns to him and speaks of rebuilding. Not in haste, not in the old image, but with the lessons of the past etched clearly into memory. They will walk back toward the ruins, carrying their stored words like seeds, to plant them in whatever soil remains fertile. Montag realizes that the river has not just carried him away from danger. It has delivered him to the work he was meant to do. The wind shifts, carrying with it a faint, acrid tang of smoke from the city's smoldering remains. Montag breathes it in without flinching, because now it is only part of the past, and the path ahead belongs to those willing to see clearly, even when the truth is stark. He stands, ready to follow the others, the words of books, not yet spoken, already beginning to stir in his mind. They begin their journey back toward the city at dawn, the light unfolding across the land in a slow and almost hesitant bloom. The ground is still damp with dew, each step releasing the faint fragrance of crushed grass and wild herbs. Montag walks among them, not as an outsider invited for a night, but as part of a shared motion forward. The silence between them is not awkward. It is the kind that comes when everyone understands that words, for the moment, would only scatter the weight of what they carry. Montag watches the way they walk, not hurried, not dragging, but with the even pace of people accustomed to long distances. They are travelers of time as much as space, moving through a landscape stripped of illusions. The sky, without the glare of billboards or the humming haze of the city, is a raw, pale blue. He realizes how seldom he has looked up in recent years, and how, in the city, the sky had always felt like a ceiling rather than an open expanse. Granger walks near him, occasionally speaking in measured tones. He tells Montag that society, like individuals, often chooses comfort over truth, and that this choice, made again and again, builds the very systems that keep people docile. The firemen, the parlor walls, the endless entertainment streams. These were not imposed entirely from above. They were invited in, sustained by a collective willingness to avoid discomfort. Montag considers this. The realization is unsettling. If the city was a controlled organism, then the people themselves were both its lifeblood and its jailers. Even those who felt trapped inside, it had contributed to its creation. The veil, as if lifting further, reveals to him that rebellion is not simply about tearing down structures. It is about refusing to carry the bricks that keep them standing. The others speak occasionally of the books they hold in memory, not with the urgency of those who fear forgetting, but with the quiet pride of gardeners tending to rare plants. One man carries Ecclesiastes, another the works of Marcus Aurelius, and there is a woman who has memorized large portions of the Republic. Montag himself has not yet taken a book to heart in this way, but he knows he will. Already, fragments of what he once read, the poetry Faber whispered to him, the verses Clarice's presence brought alive, stir like seeds in the dark soil of his mind. They pass a field where the earth is blackened, likely from some earlier fire, perhaps accidental, perhaps not. Granger gestures toward it, remarking that the soil will grow rich again in time. That's the trick, he says, not to fear the burn, but to learn from what grows afterward. It is a simple truth, yet in it lies the blueprint for a new kind of society, one that does not merely rebuild but transforms. As they move closer to the ruins, the faint scent of smoke grows stronger, mingling with the metallic tang of scorched steel and concrete. The horizon trembles in the heat of lingering fires. They can hear, faintly, the collapse of structures as weakened beams finally give way. Montag wonders how many others might have survived, scattered in the outskirts, perhaps already wandering like they are now. The group does not rush. They know that rebuilding begins in thought, not in stone. Their plan is not to resurrect the city as it was, but to plant pockets of knowledge, to speak ideas into ears that still have the capacity to listen. Granger says that their work will be slow and largely invisible at first, like roots spreading underground. There will be no monuments, no banners, nothing for a new generation of firemen to burn. The preservation will happen in minds, in conversations, in the way people teach their children to see past the surface of things. Montag's thoughts drift back to Clarice, her questions, her strange way of noticing the world. He sees now that she was a seed herself, one the city could not allow to grow. She had shown him that the first step toward real freedom is not running, but seeing. He wonders how many others she might have influenced, and whether her spirit will ripple quietly through whatever comes next. The sun climbs higher, and the city's bones come in a sharper view. From this distance, it looks less like a place and more like an abstract shape. Sharp lines softened by dust and haze, towers reduced to stumps, streets erased by rubble. Montag feels no urge to turn away. There's a kind of strange beauty in its brokenness, as though the land is reclaiming something that was taken from it. They stop near the edge of what had once been a park. The ground is littered with shards of glass that glint in the sunlight like fragments of some shattered illusion. Granger suggests they rest here for a while. Montag sits, feeling the warmth of the earth through his clothes, and watches the others as they quietly tend the fire they've built for cooking. The smell of roasting vegetables drifts into the air. Simple food, but made with care. For the first time, Montag senses the shape of a life not built on avoidance. Here, there's space for thought, for patience, for the long, slow work of renewal. He understands now that books were never the final goal. They were a means of shaping the mind so it could see clearly and choose wisely. And once the mind is shaped in that way, no amount of fire can truly destroy it. As they eat, the group speaks in low voices, planning their first steps. They will walk through the ruins, salvaging what they can. Not objects, but conversations, names of survivors, small caches of paper that might still be legible. Montag knows his part will come later, when he has chosen a book to carry in his own memory. Until then, he will learn from them, listen to the cadence of their words, and keep his eyes open. When they rise to move again, Montag feels lighter, though nothing about the world has grown easier. It is the lightness of having chosen a path, even if the road ahead is long and uncertain. The city waits before them, its silence almost beckoning, and they walk toward it, not to rebuild the old, but to make space for what might grow next. They enter the outskirts of the city as the afternoon light tilts into gold, the air warmer now, laced with the scent of ash and something faintly chemical. Rubble spills across cracked streets where weeds have already begun their quiet work. Small green shoots finding room between the broken slabs. The city no longer hums or pulses. Its machinery is still. In its silence, the structures seem both enormous and strangely fragile, like the husks of long-dead insects left to dry in the sun. Montag steps over what had once been a street curb, now warped and half-melted. The ground beneath his boots is gritty, littered with fragments of paper fused into unrecognizable shapes. He picks up one such fragment. It feels brittle, almost weightless, and wonders if it had once held a sentence that could have changed someone's life. Granger glances over, but says nothing, only giving the smallest nod, as if to acknowledge that sometimes the dead deserve a moment of attention. They move inward, the streets narrowing as the ruins press closer. Here and there, bits of color stand out against the gray. A faded mural on a surviving wall, a scrap of fabric caught in the jagged mouth of a window. These remnants are not alive, but they resist total erasure. Montag senses they hold a faint defiance against the fire that tried to erase them, just as the people around him hold memory against the culture that sought to silence it. The group keeps their eyes open for signs of life. Occasionally, they pause to call softly into the debris, their voices low and unthreatening. Once, from somewhere deep inside the shell of a building, there is the briefest flicker of movement. Someone watching from the shadows, perhaps not ready to step forward yet. Granger murmurs that they will return later. Survival has its own rhythms, and rushing trust only breaks it. Montag feels the layers of the city differently now. Beneath the visible ruin lies the invisible structure of the system that once ruled it, its patterns of distraction, its enforcement of sameness, the silent contracts people signed each day in exchange for comfort. The veil, fully lifted, lets him see how these structures have been woven not just into institutions, but into daily habits. The reflex to avoid hard questions, the preference for entertainment over engagement, the willing surrender of thought to the ease of being told what to think. He realizes that rebuilding must first dismantle these patterns, not with blunt force, but with a slow, steady shift in how people live and see. Granger agrees when Montag voices this thought, telling him that civilizations often collapse not from a single catastrophe, but from the quiet rot of neglected thinking. If you plant shallow roots, he says, a strong wind will always find you. As they cross a small square, they find the charred remains of what had once been a bookstore. Its sign hangs half loose, the letters warped but still faintly readable. The irony is not lost on them. Books burned within a store that once sold them, a double erasure. But amid the ashes, one of the group notices a metal box under a beam, its contents miraculously intact, a few water-damaged but legible volumes. They handle them carefully, drying each page in the fading sunlight before tucking them away. The act feels almost ceremonial, as though each rescued word is a promise kept. As the light begins to fade, they make camp in the shadow of a collapsed overpass. The sky above is streaked with deepening colors, orange giving way to purple, purple to the first hints of night. They sit around a small fire, not for warmth alone, but for the comfort of its glow, a reminder that flame can be used to nurture as well as destroy. Conversations drift between memory and intent. One man recites lines from Ecclesiastes about the seasons. Another quotes a passage from Thoreau about living deliberately. These fragments, spoken aloud, seem to thicken the air, as if layering it with something more enduring than smoke. Montag listens, storing them silently, feeling them take root in places he didn't know were empty. Before they sleep, Granger outlines their next steps. They will map the safest routes through the ruins, leave subtle markers for any wanderers seeking refuge, and begin to write, not in ink alone, but in shared memory. This way, even if the physical pages are lost, the words will remain alive in someone's voice. Montag sees now that the real library is not built of stone and paper, but of people who remember, carry, and share. That night, lying under the arc of stars, Montag reflects on the path that has brought him here, from a fireman who burned books without question, to a fugitive hunted for keeping them, to a man standing at the edge of rebuilding. The journey has burned away more than just his old role. It has stripped the illusions from his sight. He no longer seeks to return to the world as it was, but to help shape one where people do not mistake comfort for freedom. He closes his eyes, the murmur of quiet voices fading into the steady breath of those around him. Tomorrow, they will walk deeper into the city's heart. But tonight, under the open sky, Montag feels that they are already planting something, invisible yet alive, in the soil left behind by the fire. Morning arrives softly, with pale light seeping across the fractured cityscape. The ruins are washed in shades of silver and rose, their edges less harsh than the day before. The group stirs quietly, breaking camp without urgency, as if to preserve the gentleness of the dawn. Montag breathes in the cool air and senses, beneath the smell of dust, a faint hint of green, life reclaiming space in subtle, patient ways. They set out toward the city's center, moving in silence except for the crunch of debris underfoot. Here, the destruction is both more complete and more revealing. Whole blocks have been reduced to foundations and skeletal frames, their openness offering long views through what used to be walls. Montag feels as though they are walking not just through space, but through time, past the moments when the city's systems decided what to hide and what to erase. Now, with the veil gone, the manipulations are obvious. The placement of gathering spaces designed to entertain rather than engage, the advertisements still visible on surviving billboards, urging the same shallow pleasures even as the city lies in ruin. At what had once been the civic square, they stop. The centerpiece is a shattered fountain, its basin filled with rainwater and drifting leaves. Around it are the remains of government buildings, their marble facades stained black with soot. Granger gestures toward them, remarking that these halls were once the stage for decisions affecting millions. Yet most people never looked beyond the spectacle. The danger wasn't only in the lies, he says quietly, but in how willingly we ignored the truth. Montag kneels beside the fountain, running his fingers through the water. He thinks of how fire had ruled his old life, swift, destructive, final. Water, in contrast, is patient. It reshapes without hurry, carving valleys and smoothing stone over years. Perhaps rebuilding, he realizes, must follow water's example, working slowly yet irresistibly toward change. The group begins to chart the area, noting which structures could be made habitable and which should be left as memorials. The act of mapping feels intimate, almost sacred, a way of seeing the city not only as it is, but as it might become. Alongside this practical work, the group continues its other mission: to speak, share, and remember. They take turns reciting from the books they carry, each passage sparking quiet reflection. One man reads from Bradbury's own imagined future, a voice from the past warning of the dangers Montag has lived through. Another shares a poem about the dignity of ordinary life, the beauty found in paying attention. These words settle over the square like a protective layer, resisting the emptiness left by the fire. By midday, they reach what had once been the great library. Its columns still stand, though scorched and pitted, and the steps are littered with broken stone. Inside, the destruction is nearly total. Rows of shelving reduced to ash, the floor a mosaic of blackened fragments. Yet in one corner, a single bookcase remains upright, its glass doors cracked but intact. Inside are books warped by heat, but still legible. The group approaches them with reverence, each person touching the spines as if greeting old friends. They take only a few, leaving the rest for others who might find their way here. Montag chooses a volume of poetry, not for its information, but for its reminder that language can still move gently through the heart, even after everything else has been stripped away. As he holds it, he understands that preserving knowledge is not just about survival. It is about keeping the capacity for wonder alive. When they leave the library, the sun is dipping toward afternoon, the light growing warmer, shadows stretching long across the ruins. They make their way back toward the outskirts, not in defeat, but with the awareness that they carry something more precious than any object, a direction, a way forward. That evening, around the campfire, Granger speaks of cycles. Civilizations rise, collapse, and rise again. Yet each time there is a chance, small but real, to avoid repeating the same mistakes. The danger is forgetting that systems are built by human hands and can be remade only when those hands act with awareness. He looks at Montag as he says this, and Montag feels the weight and freedom of that truth settle on him. The conversation fades into shared quiet. Stars emerge overhead, scattering across the black sky. Montag tilts his head back, feeling the immensity above and the fragility of the world below. The veil has been lifted for him, and he knows it will not be lowered again. They will keep walking. They will keep remembering. And perhaps, one day, the city will hum again. Not with distraction and control, but with the low, steady music of people who think, question, and dream. The fire's glow softens, settling into embers that pulse with a slow rhythm, like the steady beat of a heart at rest. Around it, the voices grow fewer, then fade entirely, replaced by the faint sigh of night air moving between the ruins. The sharp edges of the day's work blur into gentle outlines, and even the city's scars seem less severe beneath the starlight. You can imagine the group lying down one by one, their shapes blending with the shadows, their breathing deep and even. Somewhere beyond, the wind passes over empty streets, carrying with it scents of stone, ash, and the first hints of green life daring to return. It is not a triumphant scene, not yet, but it is a peaceful one, the kind of peace that doesn't announce itself, but simply settles in and stays. Montag rests with the book he chose beside him, its weight reassuring, its presence a quiet promise. In the darkness, he doesn't open it. Some things can wait until morning. Tonight, it is enough to know it's there, waiting with its pages full of words that have survived. The night stretches wide around them, unhurried. Somewhere overhead, a faint streak of light arcs and fades. The world is still vast, still capable of beauty. And here, at this edge between ruin and renewal, there is room to breathe slowly, to let the mind drift without urgency, to feel the slow unfolding of a future not yet written. Rest here in this quiet. Let the city's silence and the soft hum of the stars carry you. Nothing presses for your attention now. The fire is low, the night is steady, and the dawn, gentle, inevitable, is on its way. Sweet dreams.